6 months later, Maya arrived at what had become known throughout the galaxy as the cafe where everything changed. The morning rush was different now. Humans and draconics mingled freely, using the communication protocols she and Kai had developed. She could hear conversations flowing smoothly between species, with the respectful courtesy structures that made both sides feel valued. "Good morning, Maya," called Jenny from behind the counter. "Your usual table is waiting and your coffee partner is already here." Maya smiled and made her way to the corner, where she could feel the familiar warmth that always surrounded Kai. But today something was different. The air hummed with an unusual energy, and she could sense more presence around their table than usual. "Good morning, Kai," she said, settling into her chair. "We have company today?" "We do." Kai's voice carried a note of anticipation. "Maya, do you remember when you said that everyone needs someone who sees them as just themselves?" "Of course." "And do you remember when you said that learning about someone gives you more reasons to appreciate who they are?" Maya nodded, curious about where this was heading. "Today, I would like you to meet some people who have learned about you and would very much like to express their appreciation." Before Maya could ask what he meant, a new voice spoke, formal, dignified, but warm with genuine emotion. "Maya Chen," the voice said in carefully pronounced English. "I am Elder Thane of the Draconic High Council. On behalf of the Confederation's 47-member worlds, I have come to thank you." Maya blinked in surprise. "Elder Thane, thank you, but I don't understand." "The protocols you and Supreme Ruler Kython developed have been implemented across all draconic territories. Our interactions with human colonies have improved dramatically. Trade disputes that had festered for years have been resolved in weeks. Most importantly, our species are beginning to understand each other." Another voice, this one with a distinctly human accent, joined the conversation. "Ms. Chen, I'm Secretary General Williams of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. The ripple effects of your work have reached every human world in the galaxy. You've given us the tools to build genuine partnerships instead of just trade agreements." Maya felt overwhelmed. We just worked on one project, in a cafe. I never imagined." "That is precisely why it worked," said a third voice. This one with the harmonic complexity that marked it as draconic, but speaking flawless English. "I am Minister Veltar. You approached our cultural differences not as problems to be solved, but as opportunities to create something new and better. You saw past what divided us to what could unite us." Kai's warm rumble joined the conversation. "Maya, you once asked me what happened 8 days ago that changed everything. Today I want to show you what has happened in the 8 months since then." Maya felt something being placed in her hands, a tablet, but one with a tactile interface she didn't recognize. As her fingers explored the surface, raised patterns emerged, forming shapes and textures that seemed to tell a story. "This is a gift from the Confederation's artisan worlds," Kai explained. "It tells the story of what we call the Maya Protocol, the new diplomatic framework based on your work. But more than that, it tells the story of two friends who changed the galaxy by seeing past differences to possibilities." As Maya's fingers traced the intricate patterns, she began to understand what she was feeling. The raised design showed two figures, one clearly human, one unmistakably draconic, sitting at a small table. Around them, the patterns expanded outward in increasingly complex spirals, representing the spreading influence of their work. Worlds connected to worlds, species to species, all flowing out from that simple center point of friendship and understanding. "Maya," Elder Thane continued, "the Confederation would like to offer you a position as our first human cultural ambassador. You would work directly with Supreme Ruler Kython to develop communication protocols for first contact situations with new species." Secretary General Williams added, "And the Terran Diplomatic Corps would like to offer you a parallel position as our first xenocultural integration specialist. Essentially, you would be humanity's voice in creating bridges with species we haven't met yet." Maya sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what was being offered. Then she began to laugh, a sound of pure joy that seemed to fill the cafe. "You want to pay me to have coffee with Kai and figure out how to help people understand each other?" "When you put it that way," Kai said, his voice warm with amusement. "Yes, well," Maya said, grinning broadly, "that sounds like the best job in the galaxy. As the formal presentations concluded and the various dignitaries began to leave, Maya found herself alone with Kai again in their corner table. The weight of the morning's revelations was settling in, but somehow it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like the natural evolution of something that had started simply and grown into something beautiful. "Kai," she said thoughtfully, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been curious about the sad rumbling sound that first morning?" "Every day," Kai replied. "But then I remember that you were curious because that is who you are. You hear someone in distress and you reach out. You encounter something you don't understand and you ask questions. You find barriers between people and you look for ways to bridge them. Meeting you wasn't chance, Maya. It was inevitable that someone like you would find someone like me and decide we should be friends." Maya reached across the table and found his large, scaled hand. "Friends and now colleagues." "The best kind of colleagues," Kai agreed. "The kind who started as friends and stayed that way." Outside the cafe windows, the city of New Geneva hummed with activity. Human and draconic citizens moved through the streets together, their interactions smooth and natural thanks to the protocols developed by a blind human student and a lonely alien king who had learned to see past their differences to their shared need for connection. The corner table where it all began. Maya and Kai began planning their next project, first contact protocols for the species that hadn't been discovered yet. Because in a galaxy full of wonders still to be found, there would always be new bridges to build, new friendships to forge, and new possibilities to explore. The conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by Kai's rumbling laughter and Maya's quick insights while outside their window. Two species continued to learn that the greatest diplomatic breakthrough in galactic history had started with something as simple as kindness between strangers who chose to become friends. Marcus spent the next 3 days trying to convince himself that walking away was the smart choice. The Wolf King had left as quietly as he'd arrived, but his presence lingered in the workshop like smoke. Every time Marcus picked up a tool or examined a piece of salvage, he found himself thinking about Guardian technology and impossible journeys through hostile space. On the 4th morning, as purple dawn painted the junkyard in ethereal light, Marcus made his decision. He sealed his workshop, packed his most essential tools, and sent a coded message to the coordinates Kralthak had left behind. The response came within hours. A sleek shuttle descended from orbit, its hull bearing the crest of the Wolf King's clan. The pilot was a young lupine female with steel-gray fur and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself as Lyra, Kralthak's daughter and heir, though she looked barely old enough to pilot a speeder, let alone command respect from hardened warriors. "My father said you would come," she said as they lifted off from Kepler 442b. Though he did not say when, Marcus secured his gear in the shuttle's cargo compartment. What made him so certain? Lyra's ears twitched in what Marcus was learning to recognize as lupine amusement. "Because you spent 3 days researching everything you could find about the Void Reach. Our intelligence networks are quite thorough." The main ship was a revelation. Marcus had expected a typical clan vessel, all brutal efficiency and intimidating weaponry. Instead, he found himself aboard something that belonged in a museum of engineering marvels. The ship was over 1 kilometer long, its hull a seamless blend of conventional alloys and materials he couldn't identify. The corridors were wide enough for Kralthak's entourage to move comfortably, but every surface showed evidence of careful planning and masterful craftsmanship. "This isn't a warship," Marcus observed as Lyra led him through passages lined with glowing panels. "The Eternal Hunt," Lyra replied with obvious pride. "My father commissioned it 15 years ago, back when the clans were still fractured. He wanted something that could serve as both flagship and mobile capital. The finest shipwrights from 12 systems contributed to its construction. They found Kralthak in what could only be called a war room, though it resembled a command center more than anything martial. Holographic displays showed stellar charts, trade routes, and tactical assessments. The Wolf King sat before the largest screen, studying data that scrolled past in languages Marcus couldn't read. "Human Marcus Chen," Kralthak said without turning around. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Impressive ship," Marcus replied, "though I notice you didn't mention it was a prototype when you asked for my help." This time Kralthak did turn, his mobility chair rotating smoothly to face Marcus. "Would it have changed your answer?" Marcus considered the question seriously. Probably not, but it does change the scope of what we're attempting. This ship should be capable of making the journey to the Void Reach, assuming we can solve the navigation problems. Explain. Marcus approached the holographic display, studying the stellar charts with an engineer's eye. Standard hyperspace drives won't work in most of the Void Reach. Too much gravitational interference from dead stars and black holes. But this ship appears to have Guardian influence technology integrated into its core systems. Krelthak's expression sharpened. You can see that? The power distribution patterns are wrong for conventional technology. Too efficient, too smooth. Either your shipwrights are the best in the galaxy, or they had help from sources they probably didn't fully understand. Marcus pointed to specific areas on the ship's schematic. These conduits here and the energy regulation systems. They're using principles that conventional physics says shouldn't work. Lyra moved closer to the display, her tail swishing with interest. The shipwrights claimed they were following ancient blueprints recovered from a derelict vessel. They called it inspired engineering. Marcus nodded slowly. That explains a lot. Guardian technology has a way of influencing other systems when they're in close proximity. It's like it teaches surrounding technology to be better than it should be. He paused, studying the Wolf King's face. How much do you really know about these legends of yours? Krelthak was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes distant. My people have an oral tradition that spans 30,000 years. The stories speak of a time when the Guardians walked among the stars like gods, shaping worlds and guiding the development of younger species. But they were not gods, merely beings who had mastered technologies we still cannot comprehend. The Wolf King gestured to his paralyzed legs. According to the legends, the Guardians built a facility in the Void Reach to conduct experiments too dangerous for inhabited systems. They called it the Nexus of Renewal, a place where they tested their ability to manipulate the fundamental forces of life itself. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And you believe this place still exists? I believe the Guardians built things to last. Their structures on other worlds have survived millions of years without maintenance. If the Nexus exists, it will be functional. Krelthak's voice carried absolute conviction, but the legends also warn of Guardians left behind, automated systems designed to prevent unauthorized access. Lyra's ears flattened against her skull. Father, you never mentioned Guardians before, because mentioning them would serve no purpose except to create fear. We will face whatever challenges await us. Krelthak looked directly at Marcus. The question is whether our engineers prepared for such possibilities. Marcus thought about his workshop on Kepler 442b, his quiet life among the salvage and scrap. He thought about the Guardian devices he'd activated, the technologies that had responded to his touch as if recognizing something familiar. He thought about the impossible journey ahead and the even more impossible goal they hoped to achieve. I'll need full access to your ship's technical specifications, he said finally, and I want to examine every piece of Guardian technology in your possession. If we're going to attempt this, I need to understand exactly what we're working with. Krelthak's smile was fierce and approving. Lyra will provide you with everything you require. We depart for the Void Reach in 72 hours. As Marcus followed Lyra toward the ship's technical sections, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking toward a destiny he'd never chosen, but somehow always been meant to fulfill. The Guardian devices in his past had led him to this moment, to this ship, to this impossible king who refused to accept the limitations others placed upon him. Behind them, Krelthak returned his attention to the stellar charts. But his reflection in the dark screen showed an expression Marcus had glimpsed only briefly. Not the confident mask of a king, but the desperate hope of a warrior who had found his last chance at redemption. The eternal hunt hummed around them as final preparations began, its Guardian influence systems responding to commands with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. In 72 hours they would enter the Void Reach and discover whether legends could become reality, or whether some dreams were too dangerous to pursue. The first sign that they had entered the Void Reach was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the eerie quiet that settled over the ship's communication systems as they lost contact with the galactic networks. Even the background hum of hyperspace engines changed, becoming deeper and more resonant, as if the very fabric of spacetime had grown thicker around them. Marcus stood in the Eternal Hunt's main engineering bay, surrounded by displays that showed impossible readings. According to every instrument on the ship, they were traveling through a region where the laws of physics operated under different rules. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared without corresponding mass signatures. Energy readings spiked and dropped in patterns that defied explanation. And through it all, the ship's guardian influenced. Systems adapted with an intelligence that made Marcus's skin crawl. The navigation computer Hazu recalibrated itself 17 times in the past hour, reported Chief Engineer Varix, a methodical Centaurian whose 4 arms allowed him to operate multiple control interfaces simultaneously. It appears to be learning the local conditions and adjusting our course accordingly. Marcus studied the navigation display, watching as their plotted route shifted subtly every few minutes. It's not just learning, he realized. It's being guided. Something out there is teaching our systems how to navigate the void reach. From behind them came the soft hum of Kralthak's mobility chair. The Wolf King had spent most of the journey in meditation, preparing himself for what they might find at their destination. But as they penetrated deeper into the void reach, he had become increasingly active, as if sensing something that called to him across the impossible distances. The legends speak of this, Kralthak said, studying the displays with intense amber eyes. They describe a realm where the Guardian's influence still lingers, where their technology continues to function long after its creators have vanished. We are traveling through the remnants of their greatest work. Lyra approached from the communication station, her expression troubled. Father, we're receiving transmissions. Not from any known source, but the patterns are consistent with Guardian communication protocols. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Can you decode them? That's the strange part, Lyra replied. The ship's computers are translating them automatically, as if the Guardian systems we've integrated are providing the linguistic keys. She activated a holographic display, showing streams of symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. They appear to be navigational beacons, but also something more. Warnings, I think. The translated text scrolled past in standard script. Approach with purpose. Only those who understand sacrifice may enter the Nexus. The price of renewal is the willingness to change. What you seek may not be what you find. Kralthak read the message 3 times before speaking. The Guardians always spoke in riddles, but their warnings were never given lightly. He looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed determination with something that might have been fear. Are you prepared to continue? Marcus thought about the question seriously. Every instinct he'd developed during his years as an engineer told him they were approaching something beyond his understanding. The Guardian technology on the ship was responding to influences he couldn't detect, adapting in ways that suggested it was following programming he couldn't access. They were venturing into the unknown, guided by forces they couldn't control. I'm prepared, he said finally, but I think we need to understand what we're really walking into. These warnings suggest the Nexus isn't just a medical facility. It's something more complex. Over the next 18 hours, as they approached the coordinates from Kralthak's legends, the ship's sensors began detecting structures that defied easy categorization. At first, they appeared to be space stations or artificial satellites orbiting a dead star. But as the eternal hunt drew closer, the true scope of the Guardian construction became apparent. By the ancestors, Lyra whispered, staring at the main display screen. What they had found was not a single facility, but an entire complex of interconnected structures, each one the size of a small moon. They orbited the dead star in perfect synchronization, their crystalline surfaces reflecting starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Energy streams flowed between the structures, visible to their sensors as ribbons of pure force that danced through the vacuum with impossible grace. The Nexus of Renewal, Kralthak said, his voice filled with awe. It exists. After 30,000 years, it still exists. Marcus studied the sensor readings, his engineer's mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The power output from those structures is enormous. Whatever they're doing, it's operating on a scale I've never encountered. And look at this. He highlighted specific readings on his display. The energy patterns are similar to what I've seen in Guardian medical devices, but amplified by several orders of magnitude. Medical devices? Lyra asked. The Guardians understood biological systems in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. Their healing technology doesn't just repair damage. It actually reverses entropy at the cellular level. A facility this size could theoretically— Marcus paused, the implications becoming clear. It could rewrite the fundamental structure of any biological entity. Kralthak leaned forward in his chair, amber eyes blazing with hope and determination. Then it could restore my spine. Return to me what was taken. It could do far more than that, Marcus replied quietly. A facility this powerful could remake you entirely. The question is whether that's what you really want. Before anyone could respond, new alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the main display, energy signatures appeared around their vessel, moving with purpose and intelligence. They looked like ships, but their design was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Smooth organic curves suggested they had been grown rather than built, and they moved through space with a fluid grace that made conventional vessels look clumsy by comparison. Guardian ships, Varix reported, his forearms dancing across control interfaces, but they're not responding to any standard hailing frequencies. One of the vessels moved closer, and suddenly the Eternal Hunt's communication systems activated without input from the crew. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in their minds rather than through their ears. Visitors to the Nexus of Renewal, you have come seeking transformation, but transformation requires understanding. You will be tested. Those who pass may proceed. Those who fail will be turned away, unharmed but unchanged. The transmission ended, leaving them in silence. Around their ship, the Guardian vessels held position, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply waiting. Kralthak straightened in his chair, every inch the warrior king despite his paralysis. What form will these tests take? The answer came not as a transmission, but as a change in their environment. The ship's systems began responding to external influences, displaying information none of them had requested. Personal histories, psychological profiles, and detailed scans of their biological and mental states appeared on screens. Throughout the bridge, Marcus watched in fascination and growing unease as the Guardian systems analyzed them with precision that bordered on violation. Every scar, every memory, every dream and fear was catalogued with clinical efficiency. They were being evaluated not just for their intentions, but for their worthiness to receive what they sought. The first test, Lyra said, reading from her station. Honesty. Each of us must state our true reasons for seeking the Nexus. Deception will be detected and result in immediate failure. Marcus looked at Kralthak, then at Lyra, understanding that their journey had reached its first critical juncture. The Wolf King had brought them here seeking healing, but the Guardians demanded truth before they would provide access to their greatest secrets, and Marcus suspected that the truth they all carried was far more complex than any of them had been willing to admit. The silence stretched across the bridge as the three of them faced the Guardian, demand for absolute honesty. Marcus could feel the alien scanning systems focusing on them, waiting to detect any falsehood in their words. The weight of the moment pressed down like atmosphere from a heavy world. Kralthak spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of a king but also the vulnerability of a broken warrior. I am here because I cannot accept what I have become. For 40 years I led my people through strength and action. I united 17 clans not through words but through deeds that others could not match. Now I sit helpless while others fight my battles. His amber eyes blazed with frustrated rage. I tell myself I seek healing for my people, so I can lead them again. But the truth is simpler and more selfish. I cannot bear to be weak. The Guardian systems processed his words, and Marcus saw acceptance flow across the displays. No judgment, simply acknowledgement of truth received. Lyra stepped forward, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. I came because I love my father and cannot bear to see him suffer. But also because I fear what will happen to our people if he dies while I am still unprepared to rule. The clans follow him from respect and fear. They see me as a child playing at leadership. Her voice broke slightly. I hope the Guardians can give him back his strength so I have more time to become worthy of the crown I will inherit. Again, the systems registered truth and acceptance. Marcus felt both sets of alien eyes turned toward him, and he realized he had been dreading this moment since the tests began. His own motivations were far more complex than he had wanted to admit, even to himself. I told myself I came for the challenge, because Guardian technology fascinates me and this represents the ultimate puzzle to solve. He paused, forcing himself to examine feelings he had buried for years. But the real truth is that I've spent my entire adult life running from human space and human expectations. I'm here because among aliens I can be useful without being judged for what I'm not. The words hung in the air, more revealing than he had intended. The Guardian systems processed his admission and, like the others, showed acceptance. A new voice filled the bridge, different from the first but carrying the same harmonic complexity. Truth has been given and received. The second test begins now. Each must face what they fear most about receiving what they seek. The bridge around them shimmered and changed, reality bending in ways that hurt to perceive directly. When Marcus's vision cleared, he found himself standing alone in a space that defied description. The floor beneath his feet was solid but transparent, showing infinite depths filled with swirling galaxies. The walls were made of crystalline materials that reflected not light but thoughts and memories. Before him stood a figure that took his breath away. It was humanoid but clearly not human, tall and graceful with features that suggested both great age and timeless youth. Its skin had a metallic sheen that shifted between silver and gold, and its eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom accumulated across geological time spans. "I am what remains of those you call guardians," the figure said, its voice resonating directly in Marcus's mind. "I am the curator of this facility, the last echo of my people's greatest work." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "Are you real or just another test?" "Both. Neither. The distinction becomes meaningless at the level of existence my people achieved." The Guardian moved closer, and Marcus felt his mind examined with gentle but irresistible thoroughness. "You seek to help the Wolf King reclaim his physical form, but you fear what success might mean. I don't understand." The space around them shifted, showing Marcus images from possible futures. In one, Kralthak stood whole and powerful again, leading his clans in wars that stretched across star systems. In another, the Wolf King's restored strength came at a price that changed his fundamental nature, making him something no longer recognizable as the being Marcus had come to respect. "The nexus of renewal does not simply repair," the Guardian explained. "It transforms according to the deepest nature of the being who enters it. Your friend seeks his old strength, but strength grows from need. If his need changes, so too will the form his strength takes." Marcus studied the shifting images, beginning to understand the true complexity of what they were attempting. "You're saying he might not come out the same person?" "I am saying that the person who emerges will be who he truly needs to become, not necessarily who he thinks he wants to be. This terrifies you because you have grown to respect the being he is now, not just the warrior he was before." The truth of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. In their short time together, he had seen depths in Kralthak that went far beyond the legendary Wolf King. The paralyzed ruler had shown wisdom, patience, and a capacity for growth that might be lost if he simply returned to his old patterns of leadership through force. "What if the transformation destroys what makes him who he is?" Marcus asked. "Then that will be his choice to make and your choice to accept." The Guardian's expression showed something that might have been compassion. "Your fear is understandable but ultimately irrelevant. You cannot protect others from becoming who they are meant to be." The test space began to dissolve around them, and Marcus found himself back on the bridge of the eternal hunt. Kralthak and Lyra were there as well, each looking shaken by whatever they had experienced during their own encounters with Guardian Truth. "The final test," announced the harmonic voice that had first addressed them. "You must demonstrate understanding of the price you are willing to pay for transformation." This time, the change was more subtle. The ship's systems began displaying detailed schematics of the Nexus facility, showing exactly how the transformation process worked. Marcus studied the diagrams with growing awe and horror. The technology was beyond anything he had imagined, capable of breaking down biological entities at the molecular level and rebuilding them according to patterns that reflected their deepest potential. But the process required more than just the subject of transformation. It needed what the Guardians called sympathetic resonance from those who cared about the outcome. The people closest to the transformed being would experience echoes of the change, their own natures shifting slightly to accommodate the new reality. "It will change all of us," Marcus realized, speaking to Kralthak and Lyra. "If you undergo transformation, we'll be affected as well, not dramatically, but enough to alter who we are at a fundamental level." Kralthak studied the schematics with the intensity he had once brought to battle plans. "You would risk your own identity to help me reclaim mine." Marcus thought about his quiet life on Kepler 442b, his careful isolation from the complications of galactic politics and personal relationships. He thought about the fear that had driven him to the frontier, and the loneliness he had accepted as the price of safety. Then he looked at the Wolf King, a being who had never chosen the easy path, who faced every challenge with courage even when victory seemed impossible. "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I would." Lyra nodded her agreement, her young face set with determination that reminded Marcus powerfully of her father. The Guardian systems processed their responses, and for a long moment, the bridge was filled with harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of existence itself. Then slowly, the alien vessels around them began to move, creating a corridor that led directly toward the largest structure in the Nexus complex. "You have passed the tests," came the final transmission. "You understand the nature of transformation and accept its price. The Nexus of Renewal awaits. Enter and discover what you truly seek." As the eternal hunt moved toward the Guardian facility, Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling around them like a mantle. They had come seeking healing for a paralyzed king, but they had found something far more profound. They had found a chance to discover who they were truly meant to become, regardless of who they had been before. The question now was whether they would have the courage to embrace whatever truth the Guardians revealed. The Nexus of Renewal defied every architectural principle Marcus had ever studied. As the eternal hunt approached the docking coordinates provided by the Guardian systems, he found himself staring at structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his mind could process. Corridors twisted through space in patterns that suggested the builders had mastered not just technology, but the fundamental geometry of reality itself. The docking process happened without input from the crew. Guardian systems took control of their ship with gentle but irresistible authority, guiding them through energy barriers that felt like passing through liquid starlight. When they finally came to rest within the facility, the silence was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Environmental readings show breathable atmosphere throughout the accessible areas, Varix reported, his 4 arms working frantically to process the flood of data from their sensors. But the energy readings are unprecedented. Whatever power source runs this place, it operates on principles I cannot identify. Kralthak maneuvered his mobility chair toward the airlock, his expression set with the determination of a warrior approaching his final battle. "Then we proceed on faith. Lyra, you will remain aboard the ship." "Father, no." Lyra's protest carried the authority of an heir, not the plea of a child. "The Guardian tests included me for a reason. If the transformation affects those closest to you, I need to be present to help anchor your identity during the process." Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding. The Guardian tests had revealed truths about all of them, but they had also forged connections that went beyond mere cooperation. They were bound together now by shared knowledge and mutual vulnerability, a bond that would be essential for what lay ahead. "She's right," Marcus said quietly. "The transformation process requires sympathetic resonance from people who matter to you. Without us there, the Nexus might not be able to complete the healing." Kralthak studied both of their faces for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but you will follow my lead and retreat at the first sign of danger." The interior of the Guardian facility was even more overwhelming than its exterior. Corridors stretched in directions that seemed to violate the basic laws of geometry, lit by a soft radiance that emanated from the crystalline walls themselves. As they moved deeper into the structure, Marcus began to notice that the architecture was responding to their presence. Passages widening to accommodate Kralthak's chair, surfaces becoming more transparent to show them the way forward. "It's alive," Marcus realized, running his hand along a wall that pulsed with gentle warmth, not biological but aware. The entire facility is conscious on some level. Their path led them through chambers filled with displays that showed the history of Guardian civilization. Marcus saw images of beings who had transcended physical limitations, who had learned to manipulate matter and energy as easily as humans manipulated tools. But he also saw the price of such advancement, the gradual loss of individual identity as the Guardians merged into collective consciousness, becoming something that was more than the sum of its parts but perhaps less than the individuals who had created it. "They became gods," Lyra whispered, studying a display that showed Guardians reshaping entire star systems. "But they lost their humanity in the process." "Not humanity," Kralthak corrected, his amber eyes reflecting the ancient images. "They lost the struggle that defines individual existence. Without challenge, without the possibility of failure, they ceased to grow as separate beings." The central chamber of the Nexus was a sphere several hundred meters in diameter, its walls covered with energy patterns that shifted and flowed like living things. At the center stood a platform surrounded by devices that hurt to look at directly, their forms suggesting technologies that operated outside normal spacetime. As they entered the chamber, the harmonic voice that had first greeted them returned, but now it seemed to come from the facility itself rather than from any specific source. Wolf King Kralthak, Human Marcus Chen, Air Lyra. You have reached the heart of renewal. Here the deepest patterns of existence can be rewritten. But know this. The being who emerges from transformation may not be the being who enters. Do you accept this risk? Kralthak maneuvered his chair onto the central platform without hesitation. I accept. The chamber began to change around them, energy patterns on the walls pulsing in rhythm with some vast heartbeat. Marcus felt the Guardian technology scanning all three of them simultaneously, analyzing not just their physical forms but their emotional connections, their shared experiences, their hopes and fears. The process will begin with analysis, the facility's voice explained. The subject's current form will be mapped completely, including the damage that requires correction. Then the deeper patterns will be examined, the template of what the subject could become if all limitations were removed. Holographic displays materialized around the platform, showing Kralthak's body in incredible detail. Marcus could see the severed nerve pathways in his spine, the atrophied muscles in his legs, the subtle changes in his brain chemistry that had resulted from his injury. But as the analysis deepened, other images appeared, possibilities that took his breath away. One image showed Kralthak as he had been before his injury, but enhanced beyond normal lupine physiology. His strength was magnified, his reflexes accelerated, his mental capacity expanded to superhuman levels. Another showed him transformed into something that was barely recognizable as organic, a fusion of biological and technological systems that could survive in any environment. But the image that drew the most response from the scanning systems showed something unexpected. Kralthak stood upright and whole, but his physical enhancement was minimal. Instead, the transformation had focused on his mind and spirit, expanding his capacity for wisdom, empathy, and leadership in ways that made his physical disability irrelevant. 3 paths, the facility announced. The path of the warrior returns strength and adds power beyond natural limits. The path of transcendence abandons biological form for unlimited capability. The path of the leader heals the body but transforms the spirit. Each carries risks and benefits. Choose. Marcus watched Kralthak study the 3 possibilities, and he could see the internal struggle playing out on the Wolf King's face. The warrior path offered everything he thought he wanted. His old strength returned and magnified. The transcendence path offered godlike power at the cost of his essential nature. The leader path offered something he might not have known he needed. If I choose the warrior path, Kralthak asked, what happens to my people when my enhanced abilities make me unable to relate to their struggles? Unknown. Enhancement often creates isolation. If I choose transcendence, do I remain capable of love, of connection with individuals? Unlikely. Transcendent beings typically view individuals as components of larger patterns. And if I choose the leader path? Your body heals, but your perspective expands beyond personal concerns. You become capable of decisions that serve the greater good even when they cause personal pain. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of vast energies held in careful balance. Marcus realized he was holding his breath, waiting for a decision that would reshape not just Kralthak's future, but the destiny of entire star systems. Kralthak closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them again, Marcus saw a piece there that hadn't existed before. I choose the path of the leader, the Wolf King said firmly. I came here seeking to reclaim my old strength, but I have learned that true strength lies not in the power to impose my will, but in the wisdom to serve something greater than myself. The transformation began immediately, energy cascading around the platform in patterns too complex for Marcus to follow. He felt the sympathetic resonance the Guardians had described, his own consciousness stretching to accommodate the changes occurring in his friend. Beside him, Lyra gasped as the same forces affected her, but she stood firm, anchoring Kralthak's identity even as it evolved into something new. Light filled the chamber, and in that moment, Marcus understood that they were witnessing something that happened perhaps once in 1,000 years. the conscious evolution of a being from one state of existence to another, guided by ancient wisdom and powered by technology that bordered on magic. When the light faded, everything had changed. The figure that rose from the transformation platform was unmistakably Kralthak, yet profoundly changed. He stood on legs that moved with fluid grace, his spine straight and strong. But it was his eyes that showed the true extent of the transformation. The amber gaze that had once burned with the fury of a warrior now held depths that seemed to encompass the wisdom of ages. Marcus felt the echo of the change within himself, a subtle shift in perspective that allowed him to see patterns and connections he had never noticed before. Beside him, Lyra stood straighter, her young features touched with a maturity that spoke of accelerated understanding. The sympathetic resonance had affected them all, binding them together in ways that went beyond mere friendship or loyalty. "Father?" Lyra's voice carried wonder and just a touch of uncertainty. Kralthak turned toward her, and his smile was everything she could have hoped for. Warm, loving, and absolutely familiar despite the profound changes in his bearing. "I am still your father, little star, but I am also more than I was before." He stepped down from the platform, each movement flowing with a grace that was wholly natural, yet somehow enhanced. When he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that resonated with the Guardian technology surrounding them. "I understand now why the Guardians created this place," he said, studying the energy patterns on the chamber walls with new comprehension. "They knew that true growth requires choice, and choice requires understanding of consequences. They built the Nexus not just to heal bodies, but to transform souls that were ready for evolution." Marcus approached cautiously, his engineer's mind struggling to process the readings his enhanced awareness was providing. Kralthak's biology had been restored, but it had also been optimized in ways that went far beyond simple healing. His cellular structure was more efficient, his neural pathways enhanced for both processing speed and intuitive understanding. Yet the changes felt organic, as if they represented what he had always had the potential to become. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. Kralthak considered the question seriously, tilting his head in a gesture that was purely lupine, yet somehow more expressive than before. "Whole. For the first time in months, I feel whole. But also responsible. I can see the connections between my choices and their consequences across vast scales of time and space. The weight of leadership has not lessened. It has become more complex." The chamber around them began to shift, the energy patterns on the walls reorganizing into new configurations. The harmonic voice of the facility spoke again, but now it seemed to address Kralthak as an equal rather than a supplicant. "Transformation is complete. The Wolf King has chosen evolution over restoration, wisdom over power, but the greatest test still awaits. Will you use your enhanced understanding to serve only your own people, or will you accept a larger role in the galaxy's development?" Images appeared on the crystalline walls, showing star systems in turmoil, species locked in conflicts that could destroy entire civilizations, and cosmic threats that required cooperation between former enemies. Marcus recognized some of the situations from intelligence reports he had seen during his travels, but others showed futures that had not yet come to pass. The Guardians did not disappear, the facility continued. They transcended physical existence to become shepherds of galactic development. But transcendence brought detachment, and detachment led to indifference. The galaxy needs guides who can maintain connection to individual lives while understanding cosmic patterns. Kralthak studied the images with his enhanced perception, and Marcus could see him processing implications that would have taken teams of analysts months to uncover. "You are offering me a role as Guardian successor. I am offering you a choice. Return to your people and use your abilities to unite the clans and forge an empire that could dominate this sector of the galaxy, or accept the responsibility of guiding multiple species toward cooperation and mutual growth." The weight of the decision settled over them like a physical presence. Marcus realized that they had stumbled into something far larger than a healing mission. The Guardians had been searching for beings capable of taking on their responsibilities without losing their essential humanity. Or in this case, essential lupine nature. Lyra moved closer to her father, her enhanced awareness allowing her to sense the currents of decision flowing around him. "Whatever you choose, the clans will follow. But they will need to understand why." Kralthak nodded slowly, his amber eyes distant as he explored the full implications of both paths. "If I choose to become a Guardian successor, What happens to my identity as your father, as leader of the wolf clans? Identity evolves but does not disappear, the facility replied. You would remain Kralthak, but your perspective would expand to encompass responsibilities beyond your immediate tribe. Your people would become part of a larger family, one that includes all sapient species in this region of space. Marcus felt compelled to speak, though he wasn't sure if the words came from his own thoughts or from the enhanced intuition the transformation had given him. The galaxy is fragmenting. Too many species are choosing isolation or aggression instead of cooperation. Someone needs to show them a different path. And you believe I am that someone? Kralthak asked. I believe you're someone who puts the needs of others before your own desires, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. That's exactly what a guardian should be. The chamber fell silent as Kralthak wrestled with the decision. Marcus could see the internal struggle, the pull between the familiar role of clan leader and the terrifying responsibility of cosmic guide. But he could also see the moment when understanding crystallized, when all the implications became clear. I accept, Kralthak said finally, his voice carrying absolute conviction. But I do so with conditions. My people must be protected and allowed to maintain their culture, while adapting to broader galactic society. And I will need advisors who can help me understand the perspectives of other species. The facility's response came as a surge of energy that flowed through all three of them, carrying knowledge and capabilities that would have taken lifetimes to acquire naturally. Marcus felt his understanding of technology expand exponentially, his ability to work with guardian systems becoming as natural as breathing. Lyra gasped as leadership wisdom beyond her years settled into her consciousness, preparing her for roles she had never imagined. The compact is made, the facility announced. Kralthak of the Wolf Clans becomes guardian of this sector, guide and protector of developing civilizations. His companions become his anchors to individual perspective, ensuring that enhanced capabilities never overwhelm essential humanity. Images began flowing around them, showing potential futures that branched from this moment. Marcus saw conflicts resolved through wisdom rather than force, species learning to cooperate instead of compete, and technologies being shared for the benefit of all rather than hoarded for advantage. But he also saw the challenges they would face. Beings who preferred the old ways of domination, forces that thrived on chaos and conflict, and the constant temptation to use their enhanced abilities for personal gain. The path ahead will not be easy, Kralthak acknowledged, studying the branching possibilities with his transformed perception, but it is the right path, and for the first time since my injury, I feel truly capable of walking it. As they prepared to leave the Nexus, Marcus realized that their journey had come full circle in ways none of them had expected. They had come seeking to restore a paralyzed king, but they had discovered something far more important. They had found their true purpose in the vast tapestry of galactic civilization, not as conquerors or isolationists, but as bridges between what was and what could be. The transformation was complete, but their real work was just beginning. 6 months after leaving the Nexus of Renewal, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the transformed Eternal Hunt, watching as representatives from 37 different species gathered for what historians would later call the First Concordance. The ship itself had undergone changes almost as dramatic as its passengers, Guardian technology integrating with existing systems to create something that was part warship, part diplomatic vessel, and part mobile research station. The view outside showed a sight that would have been impossible before their journey to the Void Reach. Hegemony cruisers floated peacefully alongside Alliance destroyers, while Centaurian trade vessels shared space with Zephyrian science ships. At the center of the formation, a massive Guardian construct served as neutral meeting ground, its crystalline surfaces reflecting the hopes and fears of dozens of civilizations. The Skari delegation is still refusing to participate directly, Lyra reported, approaching with the fluid grace that had become second nature since her transformation. She now served as Kralthak's primary liaison with the various species, her enhanced understanding allowing her to navigate cultural complexities that would have baffled traditional diplomats. But they've agreed to observe the proceedings through holographic connection. Marcus nodded, his attention split between the diplomatic situation and the technical readouts flowing across his enhanced awareness. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of first contact scenarios, technological exchanges, and delicate negotiations as Kralthak had begun implementing his vision of galactic cooperation. "Any word on the Void Hunters?" he asked. Lyra's expression darkened slightly. "Intelligence suggests they're massing forces in the Beta Quadrant, but their intentions remain unclear. Father believes they're testing our resolve, waiting to see if the Concordance represents genuine unity or just another temporary alliance." The Void Hunters had emerged as the primary threat to Kralthak's vision of peace. An aggressive species that viewed cooperation as weakness, they had spent the past months probing the defenses of worlds that had joined the growing alliance. Each attack had been carefully calculated to test response times and coordination between former enemies. "Speak of the legend himself," Marcus murmured as Kralthak entered the observation deck. The transformation had settled into something that was both completely natural and subtly miraculous. Kralthak moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never been injured, but his bearing carried wisdom that could only come from having overcome profound adversity. The neural crown that had grown from his skull during the Guardian enhancement was almost invisible now, resembling decorative tattoos more than technological augmentation. "The Terran delegation has agreed to share their quantum computing research," Kralthak announced, his enhanced voice carrying harmonics that conveyed emotional undertones as clearly as words. "In exchange, the Crystalline Collective will provide access to their energy storage technologies." Marcus felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. When they had first left the Nexus, he had wondered if Kralthak's enhanced abilities would make him seem distant or alien. Instead, the Wolf King had become more himself than ever before, his natural leadership enhanced rather than replaced by Guardian wisdom. "That's the last major hurdle for the technology sharing accords," Lyra said, consulting displays that appeared in the air around her with thought command interfaces. "Once those are ratified, we can begin Phase 2 of the integration process." Phase 2 was ambitious even by Guardian standards. Rather than simply encouraging cooperation between existing civilizations, Kralthak planned to establish joint colonies where different species could learn to live and work together on a permanent basis. The challenges were enormous, but early pilot programs had shown promising results. "Sir," came a voice from the ship's communication system. It was Commander Varix, who had undergone his own subtle transformation during their time at the Nexus. "We're receiving priority transmissions from the Outer Rim Defense Grid. Multiple Void Hunter fleets have been detected moving toward Coalition space." The atmosphere on the observation deck changed instantly, enhanced senses picking up the shift in emotional energy. This was what they had been preparing for, the test that would determine whether their alliance could survive its first major challenge. "Numbers and projected targets?" Kralthak asked, his voice remaining calm despite the gravity of the situation. 12 battle fleets, approximately 300 vessels total. They appear to be targeting the joint research stations in the Kepler cluster and the mixed colony on Harmony Prime. Marcus felt his enhanced analytical abilities engage automatically, processing tactical possibilities with speed that still amazed him. "They're hitting us where cooperation is most visible. If they can destroy the joint facilities, it undermines everything we've built." "Exactly," Kralthak agreed. "But they may have underestimated how much our alliance has grown in the past 6 months. Lyra, send immediate alerts to all Concordance members. Full defensive protocols, all available ships to rally points Alpha through Delta." As Lyra coordinated the response, Marcus found himself remembering their first meeting in his salvage yard. The paralyzed king who had desperately sought healing had become something none of them could have imagined. A guardian of peace whose influence reached across star systems. But the core of who he was remained unchanged. A leader who would face any challenge to protect those under his care. "The response is overwhelming," Lyra reported, wonder clear in her voice. "Every single member species is contributing ships and personnel. Even the Skari are sending their deep space interdiction fleet." Through the observation deck's enhanced displays, Marcus watched as the greatest armada in galactic history began to assemble. Ships that had been designed to fight each other were forming integrated battle groups, their crews working together with coordination that should have taken decades to develop. "Guardian technology is helping," Marcus observed. "But this level of cooperation goes beyond what any enhancement could provide. They're choosing to work together." Kralthak studied the growing fleet with satisfaction that was tinged with sadness. War was always easier than peace. Enemies are simple to understand. But what we've built here represents something the galaxy has never seen. The voluntary union of sovereign species for mutual benefit. The battle, when it came, was unlike anything in recorded history. The Void Hunters expected to face fragmented fleets fighting according to their own tactical doctrines. Instead, they encountered a unified force that combined the best strategies and technologies of 37 different civilizations. Marcus watched from the eternal hunts. Command center as human ingenuity merged with Centaurian precision, Zephyrian speed combined with crystalline defensive capabilities, and Scari stealth tactics enhanced lupine assault strategies. The Void Hunter fleets, for all their individual prowess, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. "It's over," Lyra announced as the last Void Hunter vessels either surrendered or retreated into hyperspace. Total victory, with minimal casualties on our side. But Kralthak's expression remained thoughtful rather than celebratory. "This was just the beginning. Word of our success will spread, bringing new challenges and new opportunities. Some species will seek to join us, others will view us as a threat to be eliminated." Marcus understood. They had proven that cooperation was possible, but that proof would make them targets for every faction that profited from division and conflict. The galaxy was vast, and there were forces out there that would not be as easily deterred as the Void Hunters. "What's our next move?" Marcus asked. Kralthak turned from the tactical displays to look out at the assembled fleet, his enhanced perception allowing him to see not just ships, but the hopes and dreams of billions of beings who had chosen cooperation over competition. "We continue the work," he said simply. "We expand the alliance, share our technologies, and show the galaxy that there is another way forward. The Guardians gave us the tools, but the choice of how to use them remains ours." As the combined fleets began to disperse, returning to their home systems with new friendships forged in the crucible of shared danger, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had come to the Void Reach seeking to heal one being's physical limitations, but they had discovered something far more important. They had learned that true strength came not from individual power, but from the willingness to trust others, to share burdens and dreams across the vast distances that separated species and worlds. The paralyzed king who had begged for help had become the guardian of galactic peace, and in doing so, had shown the universe that even the most profound limitations could become the foundation for unimaginable growth. The future stretched ahead of them, filled with challenges and possibilities in equal measure. But for the first time in galactic history, multiple species faced that future together, united not by conquest or necessity, but by the simple recognition that they were stronger together than apart. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, ancient guardian constructs continued their patient watch, knowing that the torch of guidance had been passed to beings who would carry it with wisdom, courage,